I think it is. It might have been that. Yes, it is. Yeah, I thought about you this morning. No, it was funny. You know, I was sorry for me. Yeah, I think it was very literal.
Yeah, that's why I had him down in 2 minutes. I'm like, is he? I said I tried. packing tape in the bottom, and we can put it across your chest. Because it's too early for me to go up there. I heard Sharon say something about sitting in the audience. She said once you got time, she'll probably do that. Huh? Well, don't know, that was so she can put her foot up.
Right here.
Yeah.
I don't have any comments on the Oh, is there one now?
Well, it's not a comment, it's just one like, and it came from the social media person that they hire just to Facebook. Elections, and said, we'll keep our numbers up.
I kept watching the Lazy Moon comment. I was like,
They're coming to likes it, and it hasn't even been an hour yet.
that's awesome.
You never know with these things, like, because other things I posted, like, I just get on there, there's only 4 likes in like seconds. There's like nothing on there.
Awesome.
Well, and when they find out there's a big news article associated with it, they're probably going to go away it. If it comes forward. Yeah, good point. It'd be nice. I know I'll go there Monday night for the council.
I was gonna sit down here. Yeah, you don't come, and then I'll just walk over here.
Well, I hope they move forward. Oh no. Famous Chipotle.
Yeah, Mark is up there. I'm only gonna get up for the budget. Okay. And then, that way if I have to go leave and put my feet up somewhere, I don't have to make a spectacle or
Okay, no problem. Because I said, I know what you want to do in the audience.
It's just be weird, like in case I have to
Bail out.
no, go put my feet up. Teresa's
All right.
Okay.
All set.
All right.
Got more room spread out up here.
It's okay if I pull up some of my stuff just to make sure I get it.
Where are you going to be presenting from?
I'm just going to walk up here and do it from here. Yeah, because the longer I stay, the more comfortable I'll be and make everyone else look.
Take someone from the team.
Find out.
I was seeing like everything blowing up. Is that why?
Yeah, 109 likes and 40 comments, and it hasn't even been an hour yet.
Yeah, I kept getting in my inbox. I was like, what is? I couldn't see the post yet because I was like, what is the post?
Well, ULI's got a couple of likes on that one. Yep.
You want my peppers?
great. I love them. Yeah, I'll actually go and see you because I'll be better shape than before I fell. He has worked everything.
A good therapist is everything.
Yeah. I just won't think about how much I'm spending. But I won't. It's like a $50 copay. Twice a week. $400 a month. So I'll be going back to the CrossFit. But it's really good. I like it.
So you're up and at 'em and going to work every day?
I'm only going 4 hours. The other one teaching me to go at all. And then Friday I did 7.5. My ankle, like, oh my God. I couldn't even get it back in a room. So I'm going to talk to them tomorrow. I go tomorrow and just say, why is it it doesn't hurt. It just swells up and then I gotta lay down and put it up.
Yeah, get a ice bath. That's the fire guys.
Yeah. That's true. Wait. So I'm gonna just sit in the audience that way if I have to go like shove it.
I thought you were funny. Yeah.
I don't, yeah, and this is the one where they did both sides. Cut both sides.
So she goes, so we both get up at the same time. I get up on the at 6, and she gets ready, and I go. And I'm always able to do it right now. It's 5-year-old.
Yard work.
I'm only 46, so I shouldn't have arthritis in my hand.
So are you mowing or are you?
I'm mowing, and mowing, I don't really like it. Everybody says it's better, you know, they have gas and
My neighbors have an electric. I don't know how they do it. It's just because of the power.
no, and it's a lot. I mean, I like muscle work. I'm an exercise person. But I can only think about it last 2 hours.
No, I'm done with the yard work. In fact, now I look out my window and there's so much stuff to do.
No, I know. You gotta hire a
I need so much time. I have a restaurant.
yeah,
I need somebody to do that on my phone. I'm done.
You might as well not read it.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I can't do it. I mean, when you work it, you get up and you
evening. Welcome everyone to the Maitland City Council meeting of September 27th, 2021. Please everyone, if you take a moment and silence your electronic device. We have no invitation this evening, so let's just go straight to the Pledge of Allegiance, if we will. Do you join me? Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. We have one presentation this evening. Mr. Council Member Van Sterry will take care of this for us.
Will, would you or Brandon like to join me? Whereas the City of Maitland is committed to ensuring the safety and security of all those living in and visiting our city, and whereas fire is a serious public safety concern both locally and nationally, and homes are the location where people are the greatest risk of fire, and whereas home fires kill more than 2,770 people in the United States in 2019, according to the National Fire Protection Association, and fire departments in the United States responded to 339,500 home fires, and whereas working smoke alarms cut the risk of dying in reported home fires in half, and whereas Maitland residents should be sure everyone in the home understands the sound of the alarm and knows how to respond. Whereas Maitland residents who have planned and practiced a home fire escape plan are more prepared and will therefore be more likely to survive a fire. And whereas Maitland first responders are dedicated to reducing the occurrence of home fires and home fire injuries through prevention and protection education, and whereas Maitland residents are responsive to public education measures, are better able to take personal steps to increase their safety from fire, especially in their homes, and whereas the 2021 fire prevention work theme, Learn the Sound of Fire Safety, effectively serves to remind us it is important to learn the different sounds of smoke and carbon monoxide alarms. Now, therefore, I do hereby proclaim October 3rd through October 9th, 2021 as Fire Prevention Week. Brandon, would you like to say something? Yes, sir. Appreciate it. Yep.
It's certainly an exciting time for the firefighters. It's been 2 years since we've had the ability to get in the schools and be face-to-face with the children. There is evidence out there that shows that the efforts our firefighters are going to put forward over the next few weeks have a direct impact in creating healthy and safe fire safety habits well through childhood and into adulthood. So while we may not see the ramifications of what we're going to teach in the short term, certainly there's a potential that what we're teaching these kids stays with them throughout their lives. They're able to pass down to their children and perhaps save damage or save property and lives well into the future. So that's our goal. We're super excited to do it, as I mentioned, and thank you very much for the recognition.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we're going to get right into the public hearings and one of the big task we have every year, which is setting the ad valorem tax rate for 2022. Call the clerk to read the title of the resolution.
A resolution adopting a 4.4937 mil ad valorem tax levy upon all real and personal property for the appropriation to the general operating expense of the city, a 0.237 mil voted debt service levy upon all real and personal property for appropriation to the city of Maitland, Florida, limited tax general obligation refunding note to the city of Maitland, Florida, commencing on October 1, 2021, and ending on September the 30th, 2022. Authorizing the city manager or designee of the city to certify such millage and provide for an effective date.
Thank you, Maria. Sharon, would you like to introduce the item?
Sure. So just wanted to sort of pick up where we left off. This is setting the tax rate, but I don't think you can do that in a vacuum because the next item is to set the budget. And whatever you do with the tax rate will obviously, they play off each other. They have to be in this order because that's what truth and millage says. But I did want to cover where we left off. But first thing I want to start with is the general fund CIP, just as a refresher, since we haven't seen it since the budget draft. What's in the general fund CIP are $500,000 worth of paving, $750,000 for the community park boardwalk, which is partially grant funded, and that is widening it and repairing what needs to be repaired. Lake Sibilia Beach park improvements, and that's the start designing and planning for those improvements. And then the remainder are city facilities. So there's repairs to general fund buildings, the balance of the HVAC changeouts for air conditioning and heating, Art and History Museum. I know we've talked about the structural repairs that need to be done there, and this is part of that funding. It will be happening every year to get to the point that we've repaired what needs to be repaired to stabilize the structure. So this is really a stability issue so that this continues to be a treasure for years to come. And then further discussion, some funding for the library's space needs to move to the next phase if that's where council wants to go. So it's a total of $1.7 million. At the budget draft, it was right at 2, and I just want to cover council. We did see additional revenues in 21 over what we budgeted. Due to COVID, we had taken them down. Sales tax came back, local option gas tax came back. And so we did go to council right before the draft was issued to ask to use those fundings, that additional funds to do 2 sidewalks. One is the Mohican sidewalk, to extend that to Deloraine when we do the water lines, and also Domrick Hills Phase 1. As we do each phase of the sewer project, you are going to be adding a sidewalk as part of that project. So these two these are funded. Right now, you'll be carrying forward, but they will be underway in 22. So that is a slight difference, but it was just a matter of funding it now, so you don't have to fund it in 22, so that it can be done with the water lines and the lift station projects was beginning underway. So that's what's in the general fund 1.7. Recommendations for 22, we talked about the GPS traffic control devices, and we think we'll be able to find the funding in 21 to carry that forward if you allow us to get that started. We need to have more conversation about the additional future needs for the fire department, which includes facilities as well as people. So that's a long-term planning issue, and we talked about having some workshops on that so we know exactly what the 10 and 15-year needs will be, because they are not small ticket items. This was just 3 initial without the facility improvements and additional equipment that would be needed when they're fully funded. The addition of 2 police officers are in the budget that was advertised. That was something we talked about. So those actually were recommended, I believe it was 5 years ago. We filled 3 of the 5 positions. These are the remaining 2 positions that brings them to the staffing level they need to be at based on population. So it's a matter of how many officers per population. As we grow, that number grows. And then the additional recommendations were from Public Works. It was 2 positions for an urban forestry crew leader and a forester, a vehicle for those positions, 2 positions in grounds for pest management for the fields and all the additional improvements that we've done. So currently they're done by grounds trades workers who have those certifications. This would be having those positions do that full time. When we install sod, we want it to last. It's a big investment, and so this would be, they would be focusing on keeping those, what we planted from all sorts of pests. Facilities division foreman. The facilities division foreman would help maintain city facilities. So all of the facilities, which would be whether they're utility fund or general fund or stormwater, parks, they're all in the Public Works Department. And so this is maintaining, the new bathrooms over here in the park, making sure that all of those facilities, whether it's a library, that we maintain them, we paint them, so that we don't have to spend repair money. So being proactive with that, they are finding that they have more projects than they can get done, and this foreman would be able to prioritize those projects, leaving the supervisor to get quotes, get contractors, and move that stuff forward. And that position would also need a vehicle. They're not someone who sits in the office, they're somebody that's out there supervising people, helping to get the work done. So these are the 5 positions that came out of Public Works. The only positions that are funded in what was advertised are the 2 police officers. So just wanted to make that clear. Of those initial $890,000 worth of recommendations. At the last meeting, and hopefully you can see that in front of you, the millage rate was set at 4.4937, and that was the ad that ran in the newspaper. It generates an additional ad valorem of $451,000 plus another $50,000 in the CRA, because when you increase the general fund millage, the CRA city millage also increases. So it has an impact there, which we'll talk about when we get to the CRA. So total revenues are 29. Total expenditures, which includes all the personnel costs, our operating replacement capital, which is your vehicles and equipment that's being replaced, the existing vehicles and equipment, contributions to our library, art and history, anyone we're making contributions to, operating loans, that is the final payment on the doctor's office. When we bought the doctor's office, the solid waste fund loaned the general fund the money, and this is the final, over 5 years, this is the final payment back, and that will be paid off. And then it does include the recommendation for the 2 police officers, all their associated equipment, including vehicles, computers, and gear. So once the operating revenues versus the operating expenses is what we call those recurring expenses, the funds remaining at that millage rate are $714,000. There's $1.7 million in CIP. CIP is one-time expenditures, so you repair the boardwalk, you don't repair it again the next year. They're long-lived, at least 10 years in terms of their 10 years in terms of their life as a minimum to end up in the CIP. And so that will leave you with a balance of about $1 million to fund all of those capital projects we talked about at the beginning. And this, at the bottom here, is just a recommendation of how you might fund those one-time expenditures. The first suggestion is we have what's called other, and actually what that funding is a long time ago, before we adopted the current Parks and Recreation Master Plan, there was a recommendation from the Parks Board that we start saving money to purchase a big plot of land on the west side. And this was one of the transfers in, the first one, and then it was never followed up on. So that, because when the Parks Master Plan was ultimately adopted, it said don't focus on trying to buy big swaths of land that don't exist. Focus on taking the land you have and improving it. And so that's where the Parks Master Plan has been moving forward, by taking the green space we have and adding recreation facilities to those, or expanding those or replacing those. So at this point, it doesn't have a purpose. You're not saving up money to buy land on the west side. So you could close out that designation. It was designated by council. It can be undesignated by council. And just to go over the fund balance buckets, again, none of these are legally designated. These are budget designations, council's designations. They're policy and planning tools, which can be changed by the vote of the council. The first designation we have is grant matching. And that came about as a grant comes up mid-year, comes an opportunity, but it requires a $50,000 match. Instead of budgeting every year for money we may or may not use, it's in fund balance, and if we need it, we come forward and say, hey, we have a grant opportunity, we need $100,000. This gives council flexibility to say, all right, take it out of grant matching or don't. The operating contingency is actually the council's money. So when I first started working here, council used to budget a contingency every year in the budget. But what it did is it inflated the budget, and then it didn't get spent every year, and then it so it became a, well, why not leave it in fund balance? If something comes up that is a priority of the council, and you need funding, one-time funding, because it's one-time money, this designation is here to do that. It's been used over the years for different things, hasn't been used in a long time. I'm not even sure if you guys are aware. It's there, but it is there. So that $750,000 is available. One-time projects that come up that you might want to fund, study, purchase, whatever it is. We talked about other, it's actually the Parks and Recreation designation. Vehicle and equipment, we cash fund the depreciation on our vehicles and equipment so that we don't lease them, although we may in the future. We are able to purchase them and smooth out the cost of that by funding this designation, and then when we make big purchases, you take it down, then you fund it again. So it's much like when you pay off your car, but you still make car payments so that when you purchase your next car, you're paying cash. So that's something we've done long before I started here, I think in the late 80s that was started. The CIP designation, this actually was at one point the space needs designation. So for those of you that might have been here, before we had this beautiful building and the beautiful fire station and Station 47 and the Public Works building, the Butler building over there, we had a space needs study done, and it said, issue bonds, build these buildings. When it came time to build City Hall, we were at the 0.5 mils. If 2008, property values tanked, so there was no more bonding capacity left legitimately. So the council started putting money aside to cash fund part of this building. This is the amount that remained when we were done with this building. So it wasn't bond money, it was general fund money. And so it has indeed been there, and it's for any CIP project that you designated for, whatever you want to do for it. So it is just the net amount that was left over when these buildings were completed and all the furniture and fixtures were purchased. And it sits there available for you all to spend on one-time projects. It's one-time money, one-time projects. Advance from the CRA. The CRA owes money to the general fund, utility fund, road impact fee fund. And it did owe money to the Parks Fund but paid it back. So this was an advance that was made from the general fund, and the balance is about just under $7 million. And when the CRA pays all of its operating expenses and debt service, it pays back that loan. So again, it's one-time money that we loan that's coming back to the city. It's not available. You can't ask the CRA for it tomorrow. It comes back each year. So that is the $1.1 million that will come back from the CRA this year. And again, it's one-time money. At the time when we were funding the deficits in the CRA, the thought was when that money starts coming back, we'd use it in the neighborhoods, use it to do capital projects outside of the CRA, because it's no longer CRA funds. It's a reimbursement. Undesignated is just like what it sounds. When we close out revenues and expenditures at the end of the year, any savings or deficit go in and out of undesignated. So we anticipate when we close out this year to have approximately $9 million in undesignated. And then the final bucket of money is the emergency fund or the rainy day fund. And this is where we fund hurricanes, tornadoes. If we had a tremendous lost in the city of revenues that we couldn't make up, this is where that funding comes from. It's 15% of our expenditures, and we are recommending to take it up. Every time the budget grows, you have to readjust that. So to get it back to 15%, we're recommending taking $350,000 out of undesignated and putting it into that fund to bring it to 4.2. And this is that benchmark that you'll hear in terms of a policy of having 15% rainy day fund. That's your rainy day fund for emergencies. So I know I did that quickly, but I just wanted to go over what you have. Typically, there isn't a policy of how much fund balance you should have. Every city is different in terms of their size, the services they provide. We typically have about 50 to 55. We've had 42, we've had 62, but it always stays in that range of trying to keep it at about 50%. You certainly wouldn't want to have 80%, So it isn't something where you constantly close out to undesignated and never spend it, because unlike the rest of us, the city's not going to retire. Right now, we're not earning any interest, so keeping it in there and not investing it in the community doesn't have a lot of value. But we're right where we've been in terms of a benchmark. Again, we've been 45 to 60, typically between the 50-55 range is a comfortable range for a conservative city. And rather than policy, we benchmark through the audit and through Fitch ratings and Moody's. We benchmark against other cities our size that have similar services, and we're right in line with that benchmark. Any questions?
Sharon, what's the most we've had to plunder the fund balance for?
What's the most? I'm sorry.
What's the most we've taken out of it?
Almost 3 point.
Depths of the recession when a hurricane.
No, actually, when I first got here, we loaned $3.5 million to FDOT to build the off-ramp, and we took it out of fund balance. That's the most.
That's the most we've ever taken out. So
at one time.
So we're pretty much, even in the worst case scenario, we don't even.
No, we don't.
Anywhere close to 24.
No, I mean, even drawing it down about $1 million here, you're still close to 60%. You take the CRA out of there because it's not liquid. The remainder is liquid. You're still close to 60% fund balance.
So, and this is just sitting in the bank getting.
Right, and again, it's not recurring funding, so it's appropriate for capital projects, one-time projects, purchases.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we're talking somewhere between 40-60%. And you're saying that's an industry standard for cities our size?
So that's what you benchmark against cities that are similar in terms of size, general fund. We don't have an electric utility. We try to benchmark against that, and we do also get comments from Moody's and Fitch when they do.
Right.
They say, okay, where's their fund balance in terms of their peers, and what is it trending up or down?
So during the Hurricane Charlie 2004 fund days, how much did we get dinged for? How much did It was. We took, I think, like 1.2 million out. That's all. Yeah.
Now, it's.
Then we got paid back by the feds for.
We did get paid back by the feds, and the other issue is that was a very expensive storm because it was like the wild, wild west of FEMA. I mean, right. They could charge whatever they want. FEMA has cracked down on all those rules. They have to be bid out. I mean, pre-existing contracts. I mean, they have really tightened up, and so a Hurricane Charlie today wouldn't cost that much more for a flight, assuming they showed up.
Okay. Assuming you can get workers.
Yes. But I mean, FEMA has really tightened down on the gouging that happened during Charlie. It was horrendous.
And one last thing is now we kind of have this other federal money hovering, our pandemic money. So it's like $4 million that's in the bank and $4 million that's coming. So
it's a total of 8.8. We already have the 4.4.
Is the 4.4 anywhere reflected anywhere? So we'll add the 4.4 million to this, although there will be some caveats on what we can spend it on. I'm sure.
Right now.
We can get creative.
Yeah. Right now it is considered deferred, so it would not show up in here until you actually use it. That's the way it works. The majority of that funding, to be safe, we can have this meeting later, but really should be spent on stormwater, wastewater, and sewer. We can make other attempts to spend it on other things. You know, there's the portion that's revenue loss, but it's pretty clear they want you to spend it on sewer, stormwater.
Is that the first or the second 4 million? The first 4 million, they want us to spend it on that?
Well, the second 4 million for sure. That's what you're going to be spending it on. Once we calculate and the auditors agree with us on what our revenue loss is, it's long and involved, then the balance is spent on those other things. We can try to make connections to COVID, but the focus is really on water, stormwater. The safest expenditure is water, stormwater, and sewer. They're not going to pre-approve what you do, they'll just deny it later, is what we understand.
So, what we could do is use to offset the price of some of our water, stormwater.
You can actually redo the road. You can. So when you do a project, if that's ancillary, you can redo the road, redo stormwater.
So we could use this on like Dahmer Kills if
you wanted to.
Okay, or Drew and Isle.
You could accelerate projects. You can also use the money to hire someone to oversee the projects, to have that, $9 million worth of projects going on. So you can also use that money. So we can have that meeting. I don't want to.
Yeah, it'd be nice to speed up Drew and Isle and get them on sewer too. Okay.
Anybody else have any questions for Sharon? Hearing none, let's open the public hearing. Anybody would like to take their 3 minutes at the podium and address the council or this item? Please, now's your time.
Okay, Dale McDonald, 108 Angelo Court, and this is all music to my ears, particularly my questions regarding how to use that early tranche of dollars coming from the state. Working on our infrastructure is so painfully obvious that we can't really ignore it anymore, so I'm tickled to death to hear that. The fact that our population here in the city has functionally exploded in the last few years. It's simply going to cost more money to provide the level of service that we believe that we deserve. And so having Sharon and the city's traditional conservative view of reserves leaves us in a spot that I can assure you most of the 400 odd cities in the state of Florida will kill for. So we're in great shape in that regard. We will always have to watch it, but we always have to reinvest in ourselves. We haven't always done a great job of that. So this is great news to hear. Have no qualms with what a proposed millage rate is to be, and I think that it will serve us well now and going forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan.
Hi, Howard Schickerdecker, 606 Minnehaha Lane. I agree with Dale wholeheartedly on the millage rate. We need to do as much as we can, which in the past we weren't able to do because of different things being in the economy or whatever. And I'm very much in favor of increasing the millage and getting things going here. I do have one question that I didn't hear when the presentation was made. If you just could speak to it briefly. Independence Lane going north. Is that in the budget somewhere, or is that there somewhere where undesignated funds or something? I understood that you all at one time, a few years ago, had approved monies to extend that road to George. And there was an agreement that I guess that ran out. It expired. But I'd like to at least understand where that money is, if it's there still. And hopefully that's one of the things we can get going on, because that's our second part of our downtown. and it's been long overdue, and I'm hopefully excited to see it happening and actually being realized. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Howard. Well, we've heard, anybody else like to speak to this item?
We're out of mayors.
Yeah, there's all the present mayors have spoken.
Good mayors.
That's awesome. Okay, thank you, Howard and Dale, for those comments. And Sharon, do you have an answer to Howard's question?
Yes, so Independence Lane North is in the CIP. It's in 2 phases. The first phase is the right-of-way, and that is in the road impact fee fund. So the road impact fee fund can fund new roads. This is a new road. And then in 2023, so that's in 22. And then in 23 is construction, and that's coming out of the CRA. So 2 phases, obtain the right-of-way. CRA can pay for it because it is in the downtown master plan to build that road.
Okay, thank you. Great. Yeah, I think it's important. I think it's one of the council's priorities is to get that going. So I think we're all over at speed to get that going. We can make more than a single block out of this. All right, well, let's close the public hearing. No one else wants to have at it. And bring back to council. And I would just like to, I think what we have here is we have kind of embarrassment of riches here. We have a proposed increase in the millage rate to 4.49, which does not include the 5 recommended positions from Public Works. So we're kind of taxing more and getting less, I think, and I'm not sure that we need to do that. I think the good news is that we don't have to increase the millage rate. I think we can keep it steady at 4.3453 and get the 5 positions that Kim Tracy has recommended to council to increase the level of service throughout the city. So, and plus the 2 police officers that are in as well. Going over the budget, if you look at it from a 4.353 millage rate, and you add in the recommendations with total, I don't know, Sharon, do you have?
So, okay, so this is that same spreadsheet but what we started with during the budget hearing, the budget workshop, so it's the 3453. 281 is police. 276 are the remaining positions, with the exception of fire, so total of 557. So that leaves funds remaining, and again, this is at the current millage rate, so that's why the difference is here, of $60,000 to the negative. So,
right.
You know, that, assuming perfect budgeting, which never happens.
So that can essentially be found in the calculations, I think, as I understand. So that's the $60,000 difference, the current millage rate without raising taxes, to include all the recommendations, 2 police officers and 5 public works workers plus their vehicles. And again, this is going to the urban forestry, which, you know, we need to take care of not only just what's going on in the parks, but the street trees, which are in pretty dire condition. And we have historically tried to keep an arborist on staff, and that's come and gone, but it's still not enough to just have an arborist out there. I think we have to have people dedicated to the task who are, you know, the forester and the other worker with them, to work on all the rights of way to the parks to keep up. You know, essentially, this is kind of answering the visioning question we had when we met as council to kind of determine what we wanted to do and how we wanted to improve life in the city. And that was one of the items that I think got a fair amount of traction, was to increase the, you know, how we deal with our tree canopy, how we improve it, how, you know, we're losing a lot of these laurel oaks, you know, and it's a lot of our danger trees hanging out. I've gotten several calls on this types of thing. And it just seems to me that it's something that we want and we need, and it can be had within the current millage rate. We also have a couple of public works, I guess, the pest management specialists that you mentioned, Sharon. And you know, if you go out and you look at a lot of the turf that we have in some of these parks and some of the turf, I think even when we're dealing with the quad and Domrick, to the extent we still do it, I mean, it looks pretty rough. I mean, there's a lot of our public areas are just not looking very good. And I think if this is the recommendation of Kim Tracy, who's in the business, I think we ought to take it seriously, because I think they heard what we had to say when we had our Disney exercise, and I think this is what they brought in to help us get there. You know, if we're down, if at the current millage rate we add those positions, and you know, there might be some concern about, you know, governmental bloat or something, but these are not administrative positions. These are not people who are, you know, sitting in a desk or adding to some kind of bureaucracy. These are people actually going to be out in the field physically doing, you know, the cutting, the trimming, the sawing, the planting, the whatnot. So I think those are important things to keep in mind. And then we come down to how to pay for that. So that we still have the $1.77 million question of how we pay for the CIP. And as you pointed out, Sharon, the first place that I would suggest we go is to that, what is called other, or I don't even, the $221,500, which is it's a line item that it no longer has a use. So that money will sit there ad infinitum. You know, we tax people and put it in there, and we're not using the money. So I think we take that first off, and that's pretty low hanging fruit. And then we have that CIP fund balance that you mentioned, the $1.232 million, which has not been used in more than 10 years. So that just sits there. And again, this is money that we've extracted from your neighbors, and it's just not doing anything. So, you know, it's CIP money. I would put it toward the CIP that we're looking at here. So that gets us, you know, or some part of that. You're going to need the whole thing, plus all the advance from the CRA, which is $1.1 million. So we have, without even touching the undesignated fund balance, or the $4.4 million that we're going to get, you know, from the ARPA, we have kept the millage rate the same and added these positions and kind of tightened up what was a lot of extra money that was hanging out in our fund balance. So with that, I'll turn it over to anybody else who wants to speak to it.
So do we want to cover that other 60,000 up top also?
Oh, yeah, that would be covered. Yeah, it'd be covered.
That'd be covered?
Yeah. So what I would take would be $1,105,830, which is the advance from the CRA. Take the $221,500, which is was that park designation, which has not been touched in a long time. That gets you to $1.327 million. And then you could take $500,000, well, $504,370 out of the 1.2 million CIP, and you covered that whole thing plus the $60,000. Maybe we need to add another.
Right, it comes up to 1831 and some change.
Yeah, right. And so that gets us there. That, again, we don't even touch the undesignated fund balance, and we still leave half of that CIP money still sitting.
Well, let me ask about that CIP money left sitting there. I mean, why don't we take all of that out? I mean, what's the point? If we can accelerate projects with that, I would rather do that than leave it just sitting there, because that's its purpose. And so, if we can pull that out and we can maybe accelerate some of these parks projects or something, I'd rather us, you know, throw that entire bucket into the pot. And then the undesignated funds, I was pretty surprised. I always felt like $50 million during, you know, Hurricane Charlie, because I was around then, and it turns out it's so. We do have an embarrassment of riches, like you said, and I don't know if it seems we've kind of got all excited about the library, and now it's kind of, I haven't talked about that much, but, you know, is that something we want to pursue, and how we would go about that, and how it would affect these things. So, you know, there is, thanks to very conservative fiscal management here, we're in very good shape. I think we're in good shape if we went to the taxpayers for a library referendum and said, you know, we haven't raised your millage rate in X number of years, and we have, you know, these funds from the apartment buildings we can dedicate to building a library and reduce your share of that cost. I think that's could be a winning formula for getting something like that approved. Anyway.
So can I ask, the statement of having too much, I don't want to repeat it, but the notion that we have more than we should saved up, I heard that, I think, but I feel like I also heard from you before that what we have is actually in line with.
Right, so it's a range, you know, you look at so it's not, we're not at 80%, you know, we're right at 60, which is on the high side, and a lot of that had to do with COVID. I mean, we put the brakes on in terms of spending. We got, you know, $1.7 million bonus for renewing our cell tower lease, bunch of one-time money. So it's not, doesn't help you with personnel costs. You know, you spend it once, it's, you know, it's gone. So but it builds up when there's savings, and then, you know, you don't want to just keep building. It doesn't do any good to just keep growing
right,
fund balance.
It doesn't sound like we're flush.
No.
It just sounds like we're currently within the range.
Yeah, a range of comfort for a city that's very conservative.
Right.
Between 45 and 60, even if you draw down, you know, the CI, you're still just under, you know, you're probably at 57%.
Right. But it's not like we should rush out to spend this money.
No, this also gives you flexibility, which is what council is. I mean, if some opportunity comes up, either with the library or in the CRA, even drawing it down like this, you still wouldn't be not able to find, you know, you're not finding 10 million, but you would be able to find one-time money.
So the one thing on the library conversation is that I think that if you leave this money in there, you don't draw down on it this year, you are potentially, especially with the money coming in from the CRA in the future, you might reduce your need to even go out on a larger revenue ask, depending on what you do. So I mean, I don't know that saving it and, you know, earmarking it. It's sort of, to me, you're asking for it later if you use it now. So I'm not sure that gets you much. On the positions question, I think early on, and I would like to explore this more and with these coming back in, but I think we had talked about some of the costs of outsourcing that versus hiring it, you know, in-house, and then also just the need for making sure that those are fixed positions that are reoccurring. Obviously, we have to fund those year over year, so I think I asked that early on. I think because they got pulled out, I didn't get that vetted, so I would have a little bit of reservation putting those back in.
These are mid-year ads, so if you wanted us to come back with something to council that says here's in-house versus why we're recommending in-house versus contracted. Obviously, like with a facilities division foreman, you wouldn't necessarily contract that. I mean, that's a direct line foreman, supervisor. You know what I mean? Some of the others, you can certainly try to find an industry, but we can come back with that even if you approve them. Mid-year is like March. So we're not even advertising these until that time.
Yeah, I would be supportive of adding these in at this time, but that's me.
So, well, let me so what we're doing right now is really just setting the tax rate. We're going to get to the budget, you know, at the next round, so we can continue that. I mean, we can do it all, have this whole conversation right now, and then 1, 2, 3, knock out the next 3 motions, or we can.
And you don't have to right now. You just have to set the tax rate.
So So if you'd like to go ahead and keep going with this, but be mindful that we're actually just talking about the tax rate on this side.
The problem is that what Sharon just said is sort of hand in hand, so it's kind of like how do you deal with one without the other?
Right.
So, I'm happy to do it in whatever order, but it seems to me she presented it all at once, so it's sort of hard to separate the two.
Well, so I guess the way I look at it is if you're comfortable drawing down fund balance as shown, or however you want to approve, I mean, draw down the ones you want, it's, you know, it's a policy issue, there's no legal restrictions on any of them other than the advance, which is not totally liquid, only to 1.1 million.
Just so we're talking about apples to apples, Sharon, we'll
Yeah.
say that when you're talking about benchmarking the fund balance, you're talking about the undesignated fund balance, right?
So it's all,
And the
it's
emergency.
total fund balance that is expendable and not legally appropriated. So in other words, all of the fund balance at your discretion. So we call these designations, but legally they can all be spent with the exception of the CRA money. So when I say we're at 45 to 60, that is your emergency, your undesignated, your CIP vehicle, operating contingency, grant. It's the whole thing except for the CRA because it's not liquid.
So in a hypothetical situation, if we decided to go ahead with the example of the library, and we were told it would cost $15 million to build the library, we could stroke a check to pay for that out of what we currently have without having to go to the voters on a measure to ask for more money.
You could, but I'd probably be on the floor if you did. I mean,
But hypothetically, what we're
yes,
saying
there are
is
no
that-
legal restrictions.
Okay.
Yes.
I just wanted to put it there, is that hypothetically, we could stroke a check for that.
Yes.
Because we have the money to do it.
Yes.
Plus,
Not that we want to kill Sharon.
Right.
well, and also I think we've looked at whether or not this library actually needs to be the big library versus something on a smaller scale.
Yeah, we're not there yet. I think the question is, none of this is legally designated. It's all technically just fund balance, and then council over the years have created buckets that are not legally restricted. It's your discretion. It's a vote.
I'm just prefacing the big number that
Okay.
she's laid out.
Right, and I was just giving an example of if
Or
we
you
decided.
could do any part of that, so you could say, well, we'll pay for half the library, and again, from a marketing standpoint, say that's coming out of CRA funds.
And I agree with John in that I think that drawing down on that CIP does make some sense. I just don't know that I feel like we should start that process. I think there's a lot of things we are deficient on capital improvements, and we've talked about it. So I don't know that is now the right time or not to draw down on that money. I think there are a lot of items that we've talked about, and I don't know that we want to do or not, or do go ahead and spend that money now. So,
Sharon,
but I agree, John, that letting that money sit there doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense.
I have just one question about that CIP money. Is that is that dedicated if there's ever like a public emergency, like there's sewer line gets blown out, stormwater or something?
No. So emergency in this situation, this is only general fund.
Okay. Just
So-
say we say, oh well, listen, we got a project we want, and that would be it.
Yeah.
That's all we need.
So the utility fund has its own, it's not tax funded, so it's run like a business. So it's either, we
So we're not going to hurt ourselves by taking
No.
that money from.
No.
Okay, that was kind of where I was going.
But I mean, we could, for example, we could take Independence Lane, instead of spending it in 23, we could, if we could get it all done, do it in 22 and use that 1.2.
You could, but I might caution you, I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but you've got CRA money coming in from now to 2035 that can only be spent in the CRA. That's one of the few projects that's actually approved, so that's why I budgeted it in the CRA, because you want to.
Sure. I'm just making
Yeah.
that example then, is what you're saying.
Well, I want to be clear, like, we want to
No,
start
no.
using that CRA money, but say Project X, yes. Yeah, you can use, and there's undesignated of 8 million. You could take 2 million out to do Maitland Avenue, whatever you want to do.
So, and I haven't spoken to this directly yet, but it seems to me that the millage rate is really what's on the table
Right.
here. And I haven't heard anybody say we need
Mayor,
to
I'll-
raise the.
To move the ball, I'll make a motion and we approve the millage rate to keep it where it is at 4.353.
4.3453?
Oh, sorry.
4.49?
4.345. I missed that in my notes. I think I used to do this professionally. Okay.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second for that? All right, well, it looks like that dies for a lack of a second. Yes, we have a better idea.
I'm going to share my concern that I shared at the last meeting in support of us increasing the millage rate slightly. As much as I can see that we can fully fund everything here. You know, somebody said conservative fiscal management, and while I congratulate Sharon and the staff on, you know, tightening the belts and being able to always pay for things that we need, conservative fiscal management also means we've never stretched ourselves to pay for the things that we need in order to grow the city. And I think it concerns me greatly that we would want to roll back our millage rate to what it already was this year when we know that we are a growing city and we need to expend more money on the things that we need in order to grow. And so are we sending a message to our residents that we are strong and bold enough that we are willing to pay for these extra special projects, that we're willing to invest in the necessary things to spend on our future? I know we have that great big piggy bank of savings account money, and it's exciting to see that it's there. I see that as a potential for us to spend on more big projects, not to use that money to try and bolster the budget when we have the courage to be able to say to our residents, you know, let's all dip a little bit into our pockets when we're all doing really well, and let's pay for the things to improve our city. And I would support us going forward with the 4.4937 that we voted on at the last meeting.
Second motion.
I will make a motion to that effect, but I wanted to continue discussion. So.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to, I'm not.
Can I second it for discussion?
Yes, second for discussion.
Okay, I'll second it for discussion.
So Sharon, you probably want to sit down. So
I know.
You can do it. No, you can do it.
Bring a chair up there. Where's the barstool?
I think the question is, whatever the number is, I think I'd like to see, I don't like playing, moving things here. It's like a shell game, right? And so if we could cover the budget, it's sort of one number. I just don't know that we want to take money. And the thing, John, I'm trying to make sure I follow your math on some of this, is that I'm good taking money to designate it towards other things. What I don't want to do is take money from a miscellaneous fund to pay for something, take it out of one fund to pay for something that it wasn't necessarily earmarked to do. So I guess it's probably your other slide that kind of goes through that, but.
So, well, I would say the two ones that I've noted, the two items are, they were designated, they were earmarked to do something, but that something died 10 years ago. So they're just.
Yeah, but you're taking 806, under this scenario, if I understand it right, Sharon, under this scenario, you're taking 806 out of the undesignated.
Actually, that doesn't have anything to do with expenditures. So let me explain that. Every year when we look at the levels of our vehicle and the levels of our emergency, we adjust it. So that 806, if you ignore everything else, is that we're increasing the vehicle by 456. So we're saying vehicle prices are escalating, as we all know, if you can get them. We need to bump that up to make sure we have enough for vehicles in the future. So we used to go with like a 2 and 3% growth rate on the state contracts. That's like out the window. So again, we're conservative. We say bump it up, so because what we've been depreciating might not be enough. And then on emergency, we're taking that up to make sure we have 15%. So every so often we look at it. So that 806 coming from undesignated is not going up to the budget. It stays in fund balance and it just goes into those other two buckets. So you could not do it, But we like to show, this vehicle and equipment is the 1, 2, 3, fourth one down, is at 2.8. We're saying take 456 out of undesignated, make it 3.2, and that should get us where we think we will be. Now, vehicles may escalate more, I don't know. And because we know all the vehicles we'll be buying, it's a big schedule. And then on emergency, we say we need 2 months, 15%. As our budget grows, that number grows as well. So it's just taking it from undesignated, it's keeping it in fund balance. So the drawdown is 1.8, and that's coming out of other, which is parks, the CIP, and then the CRA payback. So when the CRA is paying us back every year, that's where the funding is coming from. That's the 1.8. It's like if you had a bunch of savings account, and it's yours, and you go, well, I want to start saving for a new car. That's our vehicle designation. And I want to make sure we have rainy day money, but, you know, I think it's going to rain, and you put more money in there. You still have all that money. It's just moving into those saving accounts.
Okay, so are you saying that,
Hopefully that makes sense.
so are you saying that you're good with the 4, 3, 5, 4, whatever?
It doesn't make me uncomfortable. I mean, it doesn't make me uncomfortable from a fund balance perspective, because the CRA is still paying us back, so that'll come back next year and the year after until that $5.7 million is paid back. And in the meantime, hopefully we have projects in the CRA as well that we can do, because it's throwing off almost $2 million above and beyond debt service and operations every year. So it doesn't make me uncomfortable to draw it down. I think this year, I think 21 is going to close out. I mean, we're almost there, a couple more days. We've not come back to you with any emergencies, so it should close out under budget. I mean,
So what is the net impact on average home and maintenance at the 4 versus whatever the two numbers we're talking about?
so for $300,000 worth of taxable income, it's about $50 a year.
Yeah, I guess the question, Mike, is, I think you made the motion on the 4-3. I mean, do you think that?
I agree that we need to get things done. I agree with Lindsay on that. I think we have more than enough to jumpstart a lot of projects and get things done. I don't, you know, this money I think is going to end up in the bank. I don't think we have the capacity to spend it on a lot of these projects. So you know, I would like, you know, to get to a point where we like that, we want to spend this on that, this on that, this on the library, and you know, arrive. Because right now we're just saying, you know, we'll just raise the money and figure out how to spend it later, and that makes me a little nervous. I mean, I'm in looking at these numbers, 60% is quite a reserve. So, you know, to me, we can, and I'm all for jump-starting projects, and I'm all for getting these park projects done, Lake Sedalia and Fort Maitland and Hill Rack, and we can do that, obviously. I just, you know, we just have all these resources to do these things, and so it will give us more to show that we really we're serious about this. But I just don't see where getting more is going to increase what we're going to be able to do, because we only have the capacity to do so much. And so I would rather wait till we have specific plans and needs for added revenue before we ask for it.
Where I'm trying to reconcile though is that, Sharon, you're saying that we aren't, it's not just money in the bank, this is within fiscal responsibility of, yes, we are conservative, but it's not above, significantly above average. It sounds like it's slightly above average for a city of our size.
We're typically in the 50s, so I'd say we're right. Typically, see our size is 45, 50, something like that. So it's higher than that, but it's a number of reasons. One, COVID hit, we had the $1.7 million come in and we didn't spend. There's again, all one-time occurrences, but capital is one-time expenditures. And just to go back, because I want to be clear, and these are all these are just the general fund projects. We also have in the CRA, Independence Lane going north, we've got a bunch of stormwater projects. In addition to these two sidewalk projects we're carrying forward, your carry forward list will be coming forward with the overlook at Lake Lily. There are a tremendous amount of projects going on in 22. I don't know that we necessarily need more projects. Lift Station 1, in and of itself, is going to be a huge upheaval for the neighborhoods. It hasn't even started. It's going to close down Tuscarora, which Mike's phone number and address has been posted on every sign out there. So, it funds the undergrounding study for the city. It's funding, which is a big issue that we all want to see addressed. It's funding GIS. It's funding everything we talked about at the visioning session. So I feel like there's a lot of projects packed in here, and I know staff would agree. There's a lot of projects packed in here, in addition to what will be carried forward, and water, sewer, stormwater. This is just the general fund. The boardwalk is going to be a big project. Then we have operating projects like the invasive species and tree planting. There are a tremendous amount of activities going on. Maybe we need to sell it more. I think Robert does a great job of highlighting it, but you'll see a lot going on in 22.
So you're essentially saying even if we rose the money, you don't want to spend it?
I think we're forgetting that we're going to have $9 million we want to spend as well. And so if we want to accelerate projects with that $9 million, that's government. That's someone else's money that isn't costing our tax. No, it is costing them. I don't know how, but somehow. But proportionately per resident, we're getting a lot of money from the federal government for whatever reason. And that's going to allow us to accelerate a whole bunch of projects. Water line projects, water plant upgrade. Just things that are the 50 and 60-year infrastructure. So I don't think you'll see a lack of movement in 22, let alone if we can move the library forward and then, move forward with that as well. So
Get sewer on Minnehaha and Druid Isle.
we have beyond Druid. You've got, you've got Mayo, you've got Carver. We have a bunch of folks still, believe it or not, on septic tanks.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm done with Mr. Thomas there. I think that, in order to raise taxes, in order to extract money from folks, you have to have a good reason to do it. And we have all these projects currently going on. I would also call attention to the reason we're all sitting here wearing masks. We're still a global pandemic going on. I'm not sure this is the right time to raise taxes on folks. I think we've got to be a little more sensitive about that for some people who are, for that $50 a month it might mean something.
$50 a year.
$50 a year. But it's the purpose of raising taxes is to fund the projects that you have going on. We are currently funding all the projects we have going on, and we have more projects than we can actually handle right now. I'm afraid that what happens is if we raise the tax rate, we're just going to blow the undesignated balance again, or the fund balance, because we're not going to be able to spend the money. If you're going to spend the money, you need to staff up. If you're going to have projects, you've got to have project managers. If you're going to have, and you have to have supervisors, you have to have, folks that are, you just can't contract all that stuff out. Even if you contract it out, you do have to have project managers to call in and supervisor. So, you know, to have all this going forward, if you're not staffed up and you're not ready to do it, I don't see a real reason to do this year perhaps to raise taxes. Maybe next year we can come up with a lot of projects. We get to the end of the $9 million that we're going to get from, or $8 million we're going to get from ARPA and everything else, and we still think that we need to, we don't have enough money to carry out projects, then we need to start thinking about raising taxes. But I just can't quite get behind the idea of raising taxes in a time when we're not going to spend the money. Really, it'll all float into that blue box right there, and we'll be here next year with the you know, the fund balance bigger than it was last year, and looking for places to spend it. And I think we had, again, that visioning exercise, and we all talked about how we wanted to see the city and how we wanted to improve the services. And I think our excellent staff has taken that to heart, and they've gone out and they've started a lot of these projects. And they've also come in with recommendations to us that if you want to actually carry those things out, you need to hire the people to do them. And I hear reluctance now on the council to hire very minor trade workers because it's a budget impact. When it's clear that we have plenty in the budget to take care of it. So I'm not sure where we're headed. I'd like to kind of to hear the argument about why taxes need to be raised, and are we prepared to spend the money when the money starts coming in, rather than let the money come in first and we'll figure out how to spend it later.
So I'm on the same train with you. Is I think, you know, those spots need to be filled. I think if, you know, we want to be a desirable place for people to come live, I think, you know, there's you know, a level of service and amenities that we have to offer our residents and our future residents. And I don't know if, you know, we're really there. I think, you know, especially at this time when it's hard to find people. But I'm definitely, you know, with bringing on the urban forestry, that's something you probably need to do this year. Back to what you were saying, have them ready to go, have them up, and then next year have the project set. My only worry is next year we get here and we say, well, maybe we took too much, or we don't have enough to do the library, do this, arts and history, you know, whatever it be. And our parks, more services is needed. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm really kind of concerned if we draw too much out of there. So I guess that would be my question, but yeah, I think we need to put our money where our mouth is and fill those positions that you were talking about.
Sharon, if we drew the 1.8 million out of there, aren't we still
and you're
comfortable within the range of the 45%?
Yes, you'd still be over 50. But
yeah.
We do a 5-year plan. So those positions, from an operating perspective, but that's why we do operating to operating. The capital is one-time stuff, and that's what you're drawing down. So there's a negative 60,000 operating to operating. We don't run our budget that close. I mean, we had somebody who left this week, so there'll be lapse, or, you know what I mean, health insurance, and it happens just from the natural turnover of staff. So 60,000 generally is going to be not a problem. So you're really drawing one-time money for one-time projects. But I certainly wouldn't lead you to a place where then I go, you've got to lay all these 5 people off because we can't fund them next year. That's not, revenues are growing, sales tax is through the roof. Don't ask me why, but it is. I mean, we've definitely seen a rebound in our revenues. And one would expect, just with the housing prices and the turnover of the houses, you're going to see the ad valorem grow as well. So that growth from the apartments and the people living here and our population increases the revenue we get from the state. And I think specifically with adding police officers, growth should cover that. Otherwise, you're saying people are coming here and you're raising my taxes. Now, the forestry, some of those other things are new. But I'm not leading you to a place where I'm going to say, oh, by the way, you need a 20% tax increase. Not going to happen.
But can we fund those additional positions without raising?
Yes, so that's what I said. So if we put the positions here, those are the 5 positions from Public Works, 2 police officers, the associated vehicles, recruitment costs, all the costs associated with onboarding them. It leaves a deficit of $61,000, but in a budget of $29 million, $60,000 is lapse. It's just somebody leaving, a couple months to hire, somebody coming on board, they don't get health insurance for 3 months. It happens. Just have turnover.
So it functionally balances.
It'll
It
balance.
balances with adding these 5 positions, it balances.
And-
at the current military.
Right, and this does not include, sales tax is continuing, again, I can't tell you why, but it is continuing to grow. This is at very low interest rates. If they even start going up, that used to be a lot of our discretionary income. So these are conservative revenue estimates from my perspective, and I'm sure from Jerry's, but these are conservative.
Okay. Any
Not-
other discussion on this?
On the millage at least.
On the motion? Yeah, we have a motion and a second. And also party discussion. Anybody else? Good discussion on that? Okay, Maria?
Councilmember Hall Harrison.
Aye.
Councilmember Thomas.
Nay.
Councilmember Wild.
Nay.
Councilmember Guthrie.
I'll go nay.
Mayor Lance.
Nay. Okay, we're over 2, guys.
Well, I'll try again to make a motion to keep the millage rate where it's at. Hopefully this is correct, 4.3453.
We have a motion.
I'll second.
Second.
It was, I can say it was difficult to vote for a raise in the rate, and we essentially, we're saying we gotta find ways to spend it, which, second.
Okay, any discussion? No discussion. Maria, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Thomas.
Aye.
Councilmember Wild.
Aye.
Councilmember Guthrie.
Aye.
Councilmember Hall Harrison.
Aye.
Mayor Lance.
Aye. Okay, so we're on to resolution number, no, we have to, okay, the second part of this, right, that's millage rate, which is what it is. So we have anybody want to make a motion on the setting the debt millage rate?
I will make the motion. Give it to me, Sharon.
Set the voted debt millage at 0.2370.
There it is. 02730.
0.2370.
There you go. That's what I said.
I don't have is it for total debt millage?
What's the total millage on that?
4.5823.
4.5823. Yeah, there you go.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
Maria, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Wild.
Aye.
Councilmember Guthrie.
Aye.
Councilmember Hall Harrison.
Aye.
Councilmember Thomas.
Aye.
Mayor Lance.
Aye. Okay, now we're on to the next resolution, where we set the annual budget. Maria, would you read the title, please?
A resolution of the City of Maitland, Florida, adopting the annual budget for fiscal year beginning October 1, 2021, and ending September 30, 2022, appropriating funds for operating expenses, supplies, personnel, and otherwise appropriating funds for the efficient and effective operation of the government of the City of Maitland and all its operations and functions for the fiscal year ending September 30, 2022. Providing a means to amend the said annual budget so as to carry forward the funding of purchase order report and grants outstanding as of September 30, 2021. Providing a means to amend the said annual budget to reflect grants received after September 30, 2021. authorizing the transfer of funds herein appropriated so long as the total combined appropriation shall not be increased, thereby adopting the revenues and expenditures, the position authorization table, adopting the ad valorem property tax millage upon the assessment roll for the tax year 2021, adjusting the ad valorem property tax millage rate and providing for an effective date.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Can I move the motion?
John, I think I was the one who probably spoke up that you referred to. Problem on council about the certain positions. I mean, I think there was a request on the fire. I would just like to look at all of these positions, including fire. I mean, I'm not sure, you know, I know Sharon, we kind of pushed out the fire to look at the fire personnel. But to me, it's all, once you add these positions, I know we have attrition and we have spots that open up, but we haven't really determined fully kind of that fire issue, the addition of those personnel. And so to me, John, when you add these other ones, you're kind of saying, which ones do you value more and which ones are you budgeting for the ongoing future? And before we have an answer to the fire question and to the question as to whether or not some of those jobs that we're looking at could be done with outsourcing, that they have less of a budget impact, not having to hire a vehicle, maybe it costs more if you have to go outside. That's my reluctance there.
Okay, thank you. But before we get too far ahead, Sharon, do you have anything more to say on the budget? You feel like you told us everything you need?
No, I mean, it's really the sort of taking off on where the conversation left off.
Okay.
And the only question, I think, is which recommendations you want to put in, and then that'll total up to, the other budgets stay the same. So it's really the general fund is the one that would change. And then I think there's a typo in there, so I need to fix the millage rate. Oh, no, now it's right, I think.
Well, I would say that for the recommendations that came through from Public Works and from police, I think those were mature, fully baked recommendations. They're, let's go ahead and do it today. And I think when we're talking about fire, and correct me if I'm wrong, we're talking about the out years. We're talking about we're going to need to staff up, and I think Chief Watts has given us a heads up to say, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, you're looking at significant increases.
Right.
And hiring a firefighter is a much more complex item than hiring the integrated pest management tech or the urban forestry. I mean, you're talking about pension, you're talking about vehicles, you're talking about housing, you're talking. I mean, it's going to be a complex deal that we're all going to have to sit down and talk about, because thanks to Chief Watts for giving us the heads up, but it's going to take some thought about how to budget that out and how we're going to get there in the out years. And it's not something we need this year. It's not something we probably need next year. But it's going to start. It really is just a heads up on the budget. If census data comes in and the growth we know that we've had, then we're going to have to start staffing it up. But that's a facilities discussion. That's a pension discussion. We're going to have to do what we're going to have to do.
It's a significant number of personnel. It's not just 3, it'll ultimately be 12. It's expanding the fire station. So it's how do you want to do it, when you want to do it, how do you want to get there. And this is one recommendation where you add them over time. You still need to house them, so the building needs to be expanded. And so it is it's not like you buy a vehicle and put a firefighter in. I mean, they're here 24 hours. So.
And the recommendations we got again from Public Works are these are people that can be put to work tomorrow to go do stuff that we need done now and we need done yesterday. And they're not big ticket items. I mean, I'm looking at the integrated management pest tech is $35,300 a year. I mean, so I don't. And the specialist is $36,000.
So they're mid-year, but that includes all the onboarding costs. So. Maybe second year it's 50, but you don't need to buy another vehicle.
Right. So these are not. They're kind of a different order of magnitude, I think. And so those are the difference I see in that. And that's when they bring this recommendation. I mean, it's ready to go. I think the other one is a longer term discussion. We're going to have workshops. We're going to have to figure that out. But again, I think I think the answer, not the answer, but along the lines that Lindsay has raised, I mean, people do expect more out of Maitland, and I think we're not really meeting a lot of those expectations, and I think there's a lot of, the urban forestry it's kind of it sounds kind of daunting, but it really is just a matter of taking care of your vegetation and your trees and that's kind of something we pride ourselves on here in Maitland. I think we need to start kind of putting our money where our mouth is on that. So I would, again, with the millage rate we just passed, you can include all these, addition of 2 police officers and the total of 5 personnel, and it balances. There's nothing else we have to do. So I don't know why we would not do this. Why would we not have this work done for us today when we just pay for it?
Because you're setting up a harder discussion next year when you actually have to add those fire personnel, in my opinion.
Why is that a harder discussion?
Because you've already committed those personnel, so that tax increase that we were reluctant to do today becomes not a luxury next year. It's an automatic because you got to pay for it. That's my reluctance. I mean, I'm not. I mean, I think that just becomes, unless we're not sure that the fire will come. I think what we're saying is we think it is inevitable and it's going to have to be done. Or am I not hearing that right?
It's based on estimates of growth for the future.
Right.
And how you want to add them. I'm not sure it's
But
next.
the future is potentially now based on a census that comes in soon, right? Or no?
No, it's based upon
I thought you
projections.
were saying that you're projecting that next year we're looking at having to have those personnel added.
No, it's staffing up for the eventual need because you can't train 12 people at once.
Understood. So you have to get. We're expecting that we'll be there, and the need will be 3 at a. You can either do 12 at once in an out year, or you can.
Or you could do 6 and 6, but you also have to have the building.
I think that's a long workshop discussion. I'm not completely sold just because the fire department says we need 12 people in the new building, and we need 12 people in the new building, but I won't be here for that discussion.
I just, that's my. I'm just trying to reconcile all those personnel costs.
I'm a fan of outsourcing, but I don't know how that would work in this situation. Would you hire a budget tree to come take care of our trees, or would you hire Massey to come and treat our fields, or how would outsourcing work in that particular?
I mean, we have done it both ways. You can look at the medians and see how the outsourcing goes as well, if you want to. I mean, they're not able to find personnel, and we can't supervise their personnel. So it's not like you just outsource it and you get the same quality, but also when it's all hands on deck, these additional bodies can be redirected to work that we need, to, whether it's a storm or it's a park project or something to do. There's an advantage to having a foreman that answers to you and not to someone else.
So we would replace these people that are currently doing our medians with our own staff?
No. So this is, urban forestry is new. It's not being done. What Davey is doing is taking down dead trees when we call them and say the tree is dead. To pay, there is a contract that you can pay, I think it's expired, where they'll go plant trees. It's not Davey, it's another company, but it didn't work. It's really expensive, and it just didn't work out. I mean, they can't keep people. It's, again, we've done it both ways. We've got medians we maintain and medians they maintain, and I can tell you the ones we maintain look better.
So based on your experience, this is probably the most cost efficient bang for the buck, or?
I think with the urban forestry, for sure, having them know all your trees and not somebody they send into the city constantly that don't even know what street they're on. There's an ownership that comes with that I think we all know when you're not just somebody who shows up because you were told to show up.
Yeah. With
the foreman, you just don't. That's a working supervisor giving direction. And then the integrated pest management, I mean, we've brought people in. I mean, we've got some good people in-house that most likely would do these jobs and do them full time. Right now they're being pulled between different jobs, so it's more of a manpower issue for us. But as we add all these parks, I mean, these are the positions we talked about going to $15 an hour.
Okay.
All right, could you, for 1 second, could you talk about the facilities division foreman, which I think is a critical one, the facilities division foreman, and it's a position you really couldn't contract out.
No.
And it's somebody that now where you're kind of like.
It's been needed. We are one of the few cities that doesn't have a purchasing department. So each division and each department head is doing their own purchasing. So you have a facility supervisor who's we got to get 3 quotes, or who's doing all that, and then identifying maintenance projects. And then there's a supervision of the people doing the work, and that's what the foreman is, that person in the middle that makes sure that the work is getting done, that the right people are doing it, that the contractor that comes in is, you contract someone to change out an AC, just like in your own home, you want to make sure it gets done right and it's the right equipment. So that's what we're talking. A foreman is not someone you could contract out. You're already contracting out the AC replacement. This is your person saying, okay, it's the right equipment, it's the right size.
So really, this person would be more of the accountant than,
Well,
what the manager of that area would be. I mean, you can't really say.
There's somebody above them that's going to be doing the budgeting and all that. This is the
Right.
person making sure that, this is a foreman, if you know what I mean? Like, this is the person on the job that's supervising the line staff.
Okay.
Do we need a public hearing on this, John?
Yes, let's let Sharon sit down for a moment. We can open the public hearing. And would anybody from the public like to address council and the world at large on this issue? Seeing none. Oh, wait, here he goes. All right.
Okay.
Close the public hearing.
I'll make the motion to, it's a long, what you said was really long there. Just the top one.
I just say move the motion, and that usually works.
And what's the number including the 5 positions, Sharon? Give me the
So it's $30,742,000.
Okay. I'll move to approve the budget, general fund budget of $30,742,000.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Ray, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Guthrie?
Aye.
Councilmember Hall Harrison?
Aye.
Councilmember Thomas?
Aye.
Councilmember Wild?
Aye.
Mayor Lance?
Aye.
And just for clarification, that also includes the utilities fund, the stormwater fund, the debt service fund, and all the other funds in the resolution, and whose amounts
You
didn't
didn't tell us
change.
that.
I was just making sure
The general fund number is the only one that changed, yeah.
And I appreciate the explanation of when we're going to need those personnel.
Okay. Rolling along to our next one, we're under ordinance regarding capital improvement program 2022 to 2026. Ray, would you read the title?
An ordinance to amend ordinance number 1381 in direct relation to the capital improvement program, table 1, amending the governance and implementation element of the Maitland Comprehensive Development Plan 2035 to replace table 7.1 capital improvement program, to recognize the annual update of the City of Maitland's 5-year CIP, amending the CDP relating to Orange County Public Schools, to recognize the annual update of the OCPS 10-year capital outlay plan, and providing effective date.
Okay, thank you. Sharon, do you like to introduce this item? Sorry, I can't go again.
So from the draft, the only changes were the ones that we talked about, which was Mohican sidewalks were funded in 21, so they were pulled out. And then Gem Lake, Alvin and Gem Lake project is actually has funding in the stormwater fund right now, so that was pulled out. And we accelerated a couple of feasibility studies. So that table 2 is attached. It spelled out all of the projects, but those were the only 2 changes: Mohican sidewalks, Gem Lake, Alvin pipe.
Okay. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions of Sharon? No questions? Let's open the public hearing on this item. Anybody from the public like to address council?
Yeah, again, Dale McDowell, 108 Tangela. We've got a new match study, if you will, 2.0, coming from DOT, that we may want to consider what that may entail at some point, which I would expect would include some transportation changes in within the CRA. So it's thought to consider for future CIP consideration. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Anybody else? Seeing none, let's close the public period.
I move to approve the fiscal year 2022 capital improvement program, including revised table 1.
Second.
Motion and a second. Ray, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Paul Harrison.
Aye.
Councilmember Thomas.
Aye.
Councilmember Wild.
Aye.
Councilmember Guthrie.
Aye.
Mayor Lance.
Aye. Okay, now we have a quick maneuver. Haven't done it in a while, but we're going to recess the city council meeting, convene the community redevelopment agency meeting, and we would like to ask Teresa Garrett to come join us at the dais. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for sticking with us through the.
Are you having second thoughts about this?
I only come once a year. Not too bad.
We wish it was more.
Right.
At this moment, let's call to order the Community Redevelopment Agency meeting of September 27th, 2021. First order of business is to approve the minutes. Motion on that? Approving the minutes of the February 22.
Sure, I'll make the motion to approve the community redevelopment agency minutes.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? None. Maria, would you call the roll?
Member Guthrie.
Aye.
Member Paul Harrison.
Aye.
Member Thomas.
Aye.
Member Wild.
Aye.
Member Garrett.
Aye.
Mayor Lance.
Aye. Okay, now it's time for the public period for the Community Redevelopment Agency. Anybody would like to address the CRA at a time? Good. We close it back up. Seeing no one who wants to speak. Is there any old business? City manager, the assistant city manager. No old business. We have new business, which is the resolution of the CRA budget. And Ray, would you please?
A resolution of the City of Maitland, Florida, adopting the CRA budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2021, and September the 30th, 2022. Appropriating funds for operating expenses, supplies, personnel, and otherwise appropriating funds for the effective and efficient operations of the CRA. Providing a means to amend the set budget as to carry forward the funding of purchase orders, work orders, and grants outstanding as of September the 30th, 2021. Providing a means to amend the said budget to reflect grants received after September the 30th, 2021. Authorizing the transfer of funds herein appropriate so as long as the total combined appropriations shall not be increased hereby. Adopting the revenues and expenditures or providing for an effective date.
Okay. Sharon, would you like to introduce guys?
Sure, just quickly, in your packet, there were two scenarios, only because the millage rate, it doesn't change the resolution only talks about the expenditures. The millage rate would have changed the TIF revenues and the payment back to the general fund. So based upon the 4.3453, the budget resolution is unchanged at $909,180, which is mostly debt service and about $14,000 worth of operating costs. $800,000, that leaves excess revenues. You may have been aware that the CRA rules changed at the end of every year now. Any excess revenues have to be calculated and they can only be used for certain things, which is return them, repay interfund advances or repay debt early, or earmark them for a project. We're recommending that $800,000 gets repaid to the Road Impact Fund. That fund can only build new roads. And so that would be for Independence Lane North for the right-of-way. And then the 1.1 million repay the general fund advance. So that's a total of 1.9 million that would be repaid back, and there's still about 9 million owed among all the funds. So this will pay that down significantly.
Okay, thanks, Sharon. Does anybody have any questions? Seeing none, motion will be in order. Oh, let me just Oh, okay, fair enough. Let's open the public hearing for anybody who'd like to. See, all right? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing.
I'll move to approve the Community Redevelopment Agency annual budget for fiscal year 2022.
Okay.
Second.
Motion and a second. Ready, would you call the roll?
Member Hall Harrison.
Aye.
Member Thomas.
Aye.
Member Wild.
Aye.
Member Guthrie.
Aye.
Member Garrett.
Aye.
Mayor Lance.
Aye. Okay, I think that does it for the CRA. Thank you, Ms. Garrett, for coming out this evening. And let's adjourn the CRA meeting and reconvene the city council meeting. The city manager, is there any old business to report?
No, sir.
Next item is the consent agenda. Is there anybody on the council like to remove any item on the consent agenda? None. So we'll ask for, is there anybody who would have any comments on consent agenda items 3 through 7? If you have any comments, now is the time to address them to the council. Seeing none, let's close the public comments and the motion will be in order.
Mayor, I move that to approve the consent agenda.
Second. Motion and a second. Maria, call the roll.
Councilmember Thomas.
Aye.
Councilmember Wild.
Aye.
Councilmember Guthrie.
Aye.
Councilmember Hall Harrison.
Aye.
Mayor Lance.
Aye. Okay, now it's time for the public period. When any member of the public would like to address the council on any issue that's not on the agenda, please come forward, please. Anybody at all? Seeing none. Close the public period. We move on to the decision items. First thing we have this evening is the amendment to the Thurston House lease. So, Mr. Regenstein, would you like to introduce the item?
Yes, sir. As we discussed at the last city council meeting, the city council was open to the idea of continuing the use of the Thurston House as a bed and breakfast. However, the council discussed approaching this as sort of a two-step process. The first was to allow the current tenant to amend the lease to do two things. First, to provide for a rent abatement for up to 6 months while the current tenants continue to market the business, and to allow for termination of the existing lease upon execution of the lease with new tenants, which leads into the second step, which is a second separate agenda item, but they are sort of tied together, so I'd like to just go into that right now.
Okay.
Which is the adoption of a new lease agreement for that future tenant that's unknown at this time. Within the new lease, we included some new clauses. Although the Ballards never had or allowed pets, we felt that it was necessary to put a no pet clause in there to protect our asset, number one, but also to reduce any liability from pet-related issues that would occur on site. We also, again, we were on sort of the honor system with Carol and Joe, but with new tenants, we felt it prudent to add a security and advanced lease deposits, basically first and last month, so there's some surety that the property would be returned to us in good condition. Obviously, the requirement that the tenants remain on site when there are guests present, and there is an issue with the city position. There's a reference to the city arborist, sort of what we discussed a little bit earlier. Sometimes we have a city arborist, sometimes it's in the budget, sometimes it's unfilled right now, or it's in the budget, we're looking to fill it. So we felt that probably the best course of action was just to designate that as the Public Works Director or designee versus the specific position, which is a little bit lower on the totem pole. As far as the ordinance goes, the amended ordinance adopting the new lease does authorize the city manager to execute the lease with a new tenant eliminating that need to come before city council, which we discussed before also. So if this is approved, we would then do the vetting at the administrative level, and Sharon would be allowed to execute that lease. The last point, and Cliff and I went back and forth on this a little bit, that was discussed at the city council meeting, was provide for a modified first term of the lease based upon the timing of the approval of the new tenant. So that would reduce the first term of the lease. Right now it's 5 and 5, an amount of time equal to the time it took to find and approve the new tenant. So if it took the Ballards 3 months to find and for us to vet and approve the new tenant, the first term of the new lease would be 4 years and 9 months, reduced by that 3-month period. The term of the lease is discussed on line 20 of the lease. Those dates were left blank. When Cliff and I talked, he requested a little bit of direction on the language so that it could be drafted correctly so we could capture the intent of the city council. So with this, there'd be 2 motions required for each item. One is just a motion to approve the addendum to the lease. The other is an ordinance, so that would be a introduction and establishment of a second hearing for the ordinance, if you so choose. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, does anybody have any questions of Mr. Ringting? Seeing none, let's ask for public comment about that. Does anybody have any comment on this issue from the public? Seeing nobody, let's close the is it, we're at the public comment
public
period? Yeah.
Again, Dale McDonald, 108 Tangela. There is, and I've spoken to several of you about this already, there is a long-term solution to the 32-year-old challenge that we've had with the Thurston House that finds itself, I believe, where we have just been essentially kicking the can down the road for a very long time. Finding some solutions, permanent solutions, not just for the Thurston House, but for that entire parcel of land. And there is a way to do this in a way that does affordable single families, freestanding single family homes that are specifically intended to be purchased and utilized by our police and fire, and have these folks have and our other eligible Maitland employees to be able to have, skin in the game. And there's a way to do that. I'd love to sit down, and I won't take any more time than I need to, John. But there's a way to do that. There are alternatives today. We've kicked this can for a very long time. The urgency that you folks may be facing and that you believe that you need to do something with a lease today does not broadly serve the community, in my view. It very narrowly serves the balance. We can do creative things there that, again, helps us with recruiting new future employees and present employees and the retainage of those employees. John, you may be familiar a little bit with an Orange County down payment assistance program. We can do something very similar to that here. Honestly, it would involve the structure and the model that I have in mind, and I've done half a dozen down payment assistance deals over the years with Orange County, with their SHIP program. We can do that. And on an affordable housing basis, hit the high points of providing housing for our police and fire and people that are eligible for that, and our other employees that are eligible for it. So there are choices. Thanks again. I'll be happy to talk with anybody about the details if you're interested. And you should be.
Okay, thank you, Dale. Anybody else? Public? Okay, seeing none, let's close the public period and we'll go back up here for discussion. Anybody have any thoughts on this, how to go forward? Have you reviewed the lease, have you reviewed the item?
No.
I just, Mark, did we ever establish, I know we talked about this several times, but how much this was really being used as a bed and breakfast?
No, sir.
So we don't even know that it is being used as, we don't know
Well,
that they're booking it as a bed and breakfast. I mean, 'cause if you look at their website, they actually weren't accepting bookings at all.
Yeah. The Ballards weren't accepting bookings in the interim period because they were moving out. When I spoke with Carol today, she's talking about reopening bookings mid-October. They currently have bookings in November based upon our discussion we had today. But
And do we know how many bookings they had in 2020 or 2019?
no.
I mean, to me, that's germane to the conversation as to whether or not you continue it as a bed and breakfast when we don't even really know for sure. If the purpose of it is a bed and breakfast and we're not even sure it's being used as a bed and breakfast, it's hard to make an argument that we should continue using it for something we're not even sure it's being used as. So I don't know. I think that would have been good information to have, but
At the last meeting or meeting before, I just said I want a very good out clause because I don't think this is going to fly as a D&D. We're going to end up taking it back, and so as long as we can get the property back, if we want to try another D&D, I'm skeptical, but at my age, you only want to allocate so much of your remaining time left to things, and so we kind of beat this thing to death, and so if we want to go ahead and they think they can get a client who's going to take this on, I'm skeptical. They shut down leasing and they cranked that back up again, and everything's going to Airbnb. And so I just think as a business model, it's questionable. But I don't know if it otherwise to do with the property. I'd like to get it taken off the heritage lands list so we have more flexibility if it comes back to us in the future. But other than if the lawyers are happy with the deal, I'll vote for them.
I was trying to find a balance.
Yeah.
I think that, I don't know what the alternative use is, but I'm not sure. And I think Lindsay, I think you made the point. This seems to come up, and it seems like we always get back to bed and breakfast. The question is it the path of least resistance, and that's why it gets chosen, or is it truly the best use? And that's what to get to that answer, I was trying to say, well, is it used as a bed and breakfast now, or is it really just a residence? And what constitutes a bed and breakfast? How many bookings a year are we looking for to say, yes, the city should keep kind of supporting this in a way? So those are and I was trying to find a middle ground of saying, let's push this out, but let's not commit to, and I don't know, Mark, where you came to on the decision of what the timing should be, because the way I look at it now, as written, this could potentially, if they can't get a buyer for the remainder of their term, we're really kicking this out potentially 12 years or so, depending on how long it takes for them to find a new buyer. So I don't know that I have the answer as to what it should be used for or what it could be used for, but I don't know that we've answered a lot of sort of underlying questions that would help us come to that determination. That's my thought. So to me, this is pushing this out too far.
Hopefully it pushes it out until next April, please.
Would it help you to have that information, to know that they had 40 or 60 or 120 bookings last year, or
Well, I mean, I think, John, the question is, if it's not being used as a bed and breakfast, let's just say really, for whatever reason, it's, I don't know whether Mike's suspicion about I'm not making any conclusion, actually. I'm not actually saying it is or is not a viable business. I have no idea. But if it's only being, if they only have 40 bookings a year, is that enough? I mean, if the purpose is really that it's really, if first question is, do we deem is there a public purpose in having a bed and breakfast? If the answer is no, well then we shouldn't have question two. But if the city wants to have a bed and breakfast, then what really is a bed and breakfast? I think if we would say they have 2 bookings a year, you'd say, well, that's not really fulfilling the purpose.
I guess my first question would be, is there anybody even interested right now in purchasing this, Mark, when you talked to them today?
Oh, well, I actually have talked to 2 interested buyers. The Ballards referred them to me regarding the stipulations of the lease, and I just couldn't commit to what I was going to do. So there were 2 folks that called me, referred by the Ballards, that were interested.
Did you feel like they were, really wanting to get into it? They had a background in it?
I didn't interview them. They were very interested in the property. One was from Chicago, the other one was from Naples.
I mean, I'll give it a go, just as long as we can take the property back in a reasonable amount of time if it turns out that they're not desirable tenants.
I don't think we need to be debating whether or not it's a viable business model. We have tenants who agree to pay a rent every month, whether or not they make that rent by coming out of their own pocket or they're making it by a profit on their business. It's irrelevant. It's sustaining the property. It's paying its cost. And we have a piece of land that is a zero cost to us as a city to maintain and continues to be a piece of land that we own with the opportunity in the future to do something different to it. If that part of the city changes and it suddenly becomes an available option. At the moment, it isn't. So as long as the thing is performing and it's paying your rent, I don't think we have to go into a deeper analysis on whether or not, how many bookings they're doing, whether or not it's a viable business model, whether Airbnb is going to, take over the market. Are they paying their rent? Yes. Are they paying it on time? Yes. Is it paying it for itself so the city isn't outlaying cost? I mean, at the moment now, because we've analyzed this to such a degree, we as a city are now taking a $1,700 a month hit for the next 6 months, theoretically, because we, are abating rent that would have otherwise been paid if we had approved the last buyers without so much questioning. So I move to approve the amended Thurston House lease, and let's move on.
I will second that based on the move on part.
The first motion would be to approve the addendum. We're taking these in order of the agenda.
It's item number 1, right? Move to approve the amended Thurston House lease.
Okay, I thought you said, okay, thank you. Didn't hear you.
Have a motion or a second?
I moved on so fast right now.
Maria, would you call this?
Councilmember Weil?
No.
Councilmember Guthrie?
I'm going to go nay.
Councilmember Paul Harrison?
Aye.
Councilmember Thomas? Mayor Lance?
Aye. Now we move on to the ordinance. Maria, would you read the title?
An ordinance of the City of Maitland, Florida, authorizing the city manager or designee to lease certain properties owned by the City of Maitland, providing for conflict and providing for an effective date.
Okay. Mark, would you like to introduce this item?
This is the phase 2 of it. This is the format for the lease that would be executed. The Ballards find a new buyer, and they pass their background checks. The one outstanding item was the term, as I discussed previously, whether we're going to reduce the first term by the amount of time it takes to find a buyer and execute the lease, or just keep it 5 and 5. And right now it's written as 5 and 5, but we're going to change that. This would need that level of clarification so we can get the wording correct.
Okay. Well, the 5 and 5 makes sense to me, because that's what, and essentially that would allow the tenant to have a firm 10 years and recoup their costs if they wanted to do that. Because the second option was actually their option. So, does anybody else have any comments, any questions of Mark on this?
Just as a clarification, and Cliff, I don't know who drafted this, but there's some I brought this up before, but there's just inconsistencies. There's references to minimum rent, which I think is a defined term, and then there's references to net rent, so I would just clean that up. There's references to lease premises and premises. I would just make it consistent. So there's a few of those that I would just clean up. Net rent being the one that most.
All right, any further discussion?
I will move to introduce the ordinance revising the lease agreement for the Thurston House and set the public hearing date for October 11, 2021.
I think we, sorry. When you hear public hearing.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Anybody from the public, we're open to public period for this item? There are no takers, we're closing the public period. Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay. Move to do the thing I just said.
I second the thing she just said.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Ray,
Councilmember Guthrie?
Aye.
Councilmember Paul Harrison?
Aye.
Councilmember Thomas?
Aye.
Councilmember Wild?
Aye.
Mayor Lyons?
all right. That takes care of Thurston House. Now we're moving on to the Charter Review Commission. They've finished their work and have given us their report. Do you need to read the title of this? Okay, yeah, so, Sharon? Yeah. Sorry. Sharon, would you like to introduce the item?
Yeah, let me just, didn't have my PowerPoint ready. And I will be brief. I just wanted to make sure that we did at least talk about all the hard work that the Charter Review Commission did, and not, even though they're not here, I'm sure they appreciate it. So the commission members, Bill Randolph was the chair, Mayor Lowndes at the time was vice chair, Sarah Grafton, Kathleen McIver, Karen Simisak were members. They were established by ordinance in June. We did change the date, so they sunset to the earlier of the acceptance of the report. So if you accept it tonight, they sunset. If not there, they sunset on December 31st. They did hold 10 public meetings between September 2020 and August 2021. To give them credit, they reviewed the entire charter, word for word, as well as recommendations that were submitted by staff and others. If you go to the report, Appendix F outlines all of the items that were actually considered and the resolution of those items as they established it. They came up with 5 recommendations in the end. Replace gender references with gender neutral language. Clarify that upon the vacancy of the mayor's office, the vice mayor shall serve as mayor only until the next regularly scheduled election. Clarify the waiting period for a mayor or council member who has served 2 terms will be 1 year or whatever, just to clarify. Eliminate the provision for decreases to future elected officials' salaries. As you know, they can go up or down. The recommendation is that it's just 0 in a year where the CPI goes backwards. Clarify that council members are not prohibited from discussing appointment or removal of city administrative officers and employees with persons other than the city manager. So those are the 5, and the only thing you need to do tonight is accept their report. At a future agenda, we'll schedule to discuss those 5 recommendations, as well as any other charter changes the council desires. You can add to that, subtract from it, do nothing, and it would be for a future voter referendum. We'll assume, hopefully, we could get it there in March, but none of it is so time sensitive that that's a deal killer if it doesn't make it. And at that time, whenever you decide what's on there, we'll have the city attorney draft up that language. Most of the ballot language is drafted for what we've already done, but just wanted to thank the commission for a lot of hard work on their part. Charter is not fun reading, so I do thank them. They were very diligent and dedicated.
Yes, thanks, Sharon. And any of them are listening, yes, and we appreciate all their work reviewing all that, and kind of inspecting the entire charter, kind of thinking big thoughts as well about what needs to go in and what needs to be changed. So that it is great work. Thank you. And tonight, I think we're just going to accept, the motion will be just to accept it, and then we'll discuss the nuts and bolts of it later. And I guess that sunsets them if we do that tonight. They'd be free to talk to each other
Yes.
about charter items, which I'm sure they're burning to do. We can release them from their thoughts. Or we can keep them shackled another week. But that's what we're here doing now. Is there any more comments or questions of Sharon on what happened during the Charter Review Commission? Or
Mr. Mayor, I'll move to public period.
Public period. Anybody
I
like
it.
Public declines, or the public comment period is closed. Any further discussion? If not, a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the Charter Review Commission report.
To accept, right?
To accept, sorry, yes.
Accept, yes.
Thank you.
I'll second the acceptance.
We have a motion and a second. Maria?
Councilmember Paul Harrison.
Aye.
Councilmember Thomas.
Aye.
Councilmember Wild.
Aye.
Councilmember Guthrie.
Aye.
Mayor Lyons.
Aye. Okay, so, no discussion items. To move on to reports. Mr. City Attorney, any reports that we should?
I have nothing to report at this time. There is activity going on in the bid forfeiture. I think you're a little bit aware of it. But in the short version is that we expect to receive a check for the full $211,000 within the next 5 to 7 days. And I also expect, based on the record requests we got, that they will, some attorney at whom got a hold of us today, will be bringing an action to try to claim that the mistake that they didn't prove over the course of however many months it's been and still haven't proven somehow actually is a thing, and that the fact that they didn't meet any of the deadlines doesn't matter. I don't know. But we are supposed to get the money very soon. A settlement agreement has been signed to that event, and they will get some back or none back, or they'll pay our fees depending on the outcome of litigation if litigation occurs. If there's any need for further updates regarding ways to settle it, so there's no litigation, I'll certainly let you know. But as we sit here, there is nothing further that I think you're not aware of.
I'd like to aggressively pursue fees.
Sorry, you'd like to pursue?
Fees, our lawyer fees.
So is that it? Cliff, anything else?
That is it, sir.
Okay, thank you. City manager? Assistant city manager, any?
All right. Just a few reminders. We have the Get Down Downtown, Friday, October 1st, this Friday, from 6 to 9, right out here on Independence Lane, and Independence Square now that it's open, so it's the first experience when we get down with the park open. National Night Out, October 5th, so one right after the other, again, here on Independence Lane and Independence Square, so Chief and his staff have been doing a lot of big planning for that, so I hope everybody can show up for that. Then quickly on that heels, October 9th, Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, which I just like to refer to as Raiders of the Lost Ark. Movie in the Park, 7:30, Saturday, October 9th. Community cleanup at Lake Sebelia Beach from 8 to 11 a.m., October 16th. And our Halloween celebration, which is a combination of our Fall Festival and Halloween celebration this year. Again, Independence Square, 5:30 to 9 p.m., October 30th. So a very, very busy October out here.
Well, we're going to get our money's worth out of the park there.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you. Lindsay, anything? Reports, Mike?
Real quick, Stacy didn't get up to talk about the library, but I know we were just talking about it beforehand. They started doing their walk again that they've been doing for years and years and years. On Thursday, 7 a.m., correct?
Yes, sir.
So spread the word if anybody's interested.
around Lake Valley.
Yeah. And Arts and History has a big show coming up, I think, on the 8th. So just things happening.
One more quick announcement. Sorry. I know, we've already kicked off and it's a big game tonight. The fire department has started doing flu shots, so they'll be available again, and they'll be at the get down giving away flu shots. So, perfect opportunity to get your flu shot. Always fun. All right. Sorry about that.
Okay. All right.
I got my
Thank you.
shot.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God, it hurt, man.
Need to get through it.